I'm Eleanor Stewart, 68 years old, and I never thought my own children would exclude me from our family trip. After gifting them the house I worked so hard for, hearing, "There was no ticket for you," broke my heart. I smiled through the pain that day. But they never imagined what would happen next. Sometimes the hardest lessons come from the people we love most. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like and subscribe button. I promise the ending will make you rethink family boundaries forever. My story begins long before that fateful dinner. 15 years ago, my husband Frank passed away suddenly from a heart attack, leaving me to raise our 3 children alone. We were fortunate that Frank had good life insurance, and my parents had left me a modest inheritance when they passed. Still, going from a 2-parent household to navigating life solo wasn't easy, especially with 3 children who each needed different kinds of support. My eldest, Jessica, was 26 when her father died. She's always been the organized one, making lists for everything, planning ahead, and taking charge. I relied on her strength during those early days of grief. Now 41, she's married to Robert, a financial advisor, and they have 2 wonderful children, Lily, who's 12, and Thomas, who's 9. Jessica inherited her father's practical nature and my determination, making her successful in her career as a hospital administrator. Brian, my middle child, was 23 when we lost Frank. Always business-minded, Brian saw opportunity everywhere. While his ambition served him well in his career as a real estate developer, his self-centeredness often created tension in family dynamics. Now 38, he's married to Kimberly, who works as a marketing executive. They're always chasing the next big thing, whether it's a business venture or a vacation home. They don't have children yet, always saying they're too busy building their empire. My youngest, Amanda, was just 20 and in college when Frank died. She's always been my baby, sensitive and artistic. Frank's death hit her particularly hard, and she took a semester off to process her grief. Now 35, she's found her footing as an elementary school art teacher. She's married to Daniel, an IT specialist, and they have 1 child, Grace, who's 6 and the spitting image of Amanda at that age. After Frank died, I sold our family home. It was too big and held too many memories. I bought a spacious 4-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood, thinking it would be perfect for family gatherings and holiday celebrations. It became our hub, the place where everyone returned no matter how far they'd wandered. Our annual summer trips began as a way to heal after Frank's passing. That first year we rented a beach house just 4 hours away. None of us were ready for anything elaborate, but we needed time together away from the empty chair at our dinner table. Over the years, these trips evolved into more ambitious adventures. National parks, cruises, even a trip to the Grand Canyon that Frank had always wanted to take us on. Planning these trips was always a family affair. We'd gather around my dining table with brochures and laptops, everyone pitching ideas and compromising until we found something perfect for all of us. These planning sessions were almost as special as the trips themselves, filled with laughter, debate, and excitement. But as the years passed, I noticed a shift. The children became busier with their own lives, their own families, their own priorities. Our weekly Sunday dinners dwindled to monthly, then to major holidays only. Phone calls became texts. Visits became rushed affairs sandwiched between other commitments. The loneliness crept in gradually. I filled my days with volunteer work at the local library, joined a book club, took up gardening. But nothing quite filled the space left by my increasingly distant children. I made extra efforts sending care packages, offering to babysit, scheduling lunch dates weeks in advance to accommodate their busy calendars. Sometimes these gestures were appreciated. Often they were met with distracted gratitude and rain checks. 5 years ago, I made a decision that seemed right at the time. My financial advisor suggested estate planning, and I thought, why wait until I'm gone for my children to benefit from what I can give them now? The house was fully paid off in a desirable neighborhood, and increasing in value each year. I decided to transfer ownership to my 3 children jointly, with the understanding that I would continue living there for as long as I wished. My lawyer, Susan, advised adding a reversibility clause, just in case, she said. I remember laughing it off. "These are my children," I told her. "We don't need legal safety nets between us." She insisted, and I relented, never imagining that claws would become my salvation. The change wasn't immediate, but it was unmistakable. Subtle comments about their house slipped into conversation. Jessica suggested a kitchen renovation without consulting me first. Brian questioned my decision to replace the aging water heater, saying I should have shopped around more for their investment. Amanda was gentler, but even she began referring to my bedroom as the guest room when talking to Grace. I told myself they were just excited about having a stake in something valuable. I reminded myself that they were raised right, that they respected me, that they appreciated all I had sacrificed for them. I believed this narrative right up until that dinner when the truth became impossible to ignore. The dinner was at Jessica's house, a monthly tradition we maintained despite everyone's busy schedules. Her home was always immaculate, a showcase of her perfect life with gleaming hardwood floors and family photos arranged just so. That evening she prepared lasagna, my recipe, though she'd improved it with artisanal cheeses and heirloom tomatoes. We sat around her dining table, the conversation flowing easily among bites of food and sips of wine. Jessica seemed particularly animated, and I noticed her exchanging knowing glances with Brian and Amanda. Eventually, she clinked her glass with her fork, drawing everyone's attention. So, she announced, I have some exciting news. I've been planning something special for all of us. My heart warmed. It had been months since we'd done anything as a family beyond these dinners. I've booked a 10-day family trip to Hawaii. Jessica continued, her voice rising with excitement. We'll be staying at that resort in Maui we've all been talking about. The one with the infinity pools and private beach access. The table erupted in enthusiasm. Brian immediately began discussing excursions, snorkeling, helicopter tours, luau's. Amanda clapped her hands and started listing the places she wanted to photograph. Their spouses joined in and soon everyone was talking at once. I sat quietly, waiting for Jessica to hand me an envelope with my itinerary, or to mention my room arrangements, or to ask about my preferences for activities. But as the conversation continued, detailed discussions of flight times, room assignments, childcare options, my name was conspicuously absent. Finally, during a brief lull, I spoke up. This sounds wonderful, Jessica. When were you thinking of sharing the details with me? I'll need to know what to pack. The table fell silent. 5 pairs of eyes avoided mine. Jessica set down her wine glass carefully, as if buying time. Mom, she began, her voice gentle in that particular way people use when delivering bad news. I'm sorry, but there was no ticket for you. We thought you'd prefer to stay home. The words hung in the air between us. I felt as if I'd been slapped. Prefer to stay home? I repeated, struggling to keep my voice steady. Why would I prefer that? Brian jumped in, always quick to take control of uncomfortable situations. Mom, it's really more of a trip for the younger generation. All that travel would be hard on someone your age. My age? I echoed. At 68, I was hardly decrepit. Just last month, I'd completed a 5K charity walk without breaking a sweat. Amanda, ever the peacemaker, reached for my hand across the table. You mentioned your arthritis bothering you last winter, Mom. We were thinking about those long flights and all the walking. And the kids can be a handful, added Robert, Jessica's husband. We thought you might enjoy some peace and quiet instead. Jessica nodded enthusiastically. Plus, someone needs to water my plants and collect the mail. We'd be so grateful if you could house sit. They continued offering excuses, each one cutting deeper than the last. The underlying message was clear. I was a burden, an afterthought, someone to be managed rather than included. I smiled. What else could I do with all those eyes on me? I nodded and said I understood, that they were probably right, that I would enjoy the quiet time to myself. I even offered to pick them up from the airport when they returned, the perfect grandmother and mother, eternally supportive and never demanding. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I was barely present. I pushed food around my plate, laughed at appropriate moments, and counted the minutes until I could leave without appearing upset. The drive home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel tightly to stop my hands from shaking, blinking rapidly to clear the tears that threatened to fall. Memories flooded my mind, nights spent beside sickbeds, thousands of home-cooked meals, countless hours helping with homework, the second job I took to pay for Jessica's braces, the student loans I was still paying for Amanda's art school, the seed money for Brian's first business venture. Had they forgotten all of that? Or worse, did they remember but simply no longer care? That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake replaying the dinner conversation, thinking of all the things I should have said. By morning, my sadness had hardened into something else. A resolve I hadn't felt in years, perhaps not since those early days after Frank's death when sheer determination was all that got me through. The morning after that devastating dinner, I found myself pulling out old photo albums from the hall closet. Page after page told the story of our family, Frank and me bringing Jessica home from the hospital, Brian's first steps, Amanda's kindergarten graduation, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, beach vacations with 3 small children building sandcastles while Frank and I watched from a blanket nearby. I lingered on a photo from Brian's high school graduation. Frank had been gone just 6 months, and the strain showed on all our faces despite the smiles we'd mustered for the camera. I'd held us together through that terrible time, becoming both mother and father overnight. I'd learned to fix leaky faucets, negotiate car purchases, kill spiders, and be the disciplinarian. All roles Frank had filled. Tucked between the pages of one album, I found the program from Amanda's college graduation. I'd worked overtime for months to help pay for her final semester after she'd spent her savings on an emergency root canal. She'd never known about those extra hours. I hadn't wanted her to worry. As the morning progressed, I moved from photos to financial documents, unearthing the folder containing the house transfer paperwork from 5 years ago. I hadn't reviewed it since signing, trusting Susan had handled everything properly. Now, I read every line carefully, paying special attention to the reversibility clause my friend had insisted upon. In the event that the gift becomes detrimental to the donor's well-being, financial security, or peace of mind, said donor reserves the right to reclaim full ownership of the property with 30 days' notice to the recipients. I picked up the phone and called Susan. "It's ironclad, Eleanor," she assured me after I explained the situation. "The house is legally theirs as a gift, but gifts can be revoked under certain circumstances. Your children excluding you from family activities while benefiting from your generosity certainly qualifies as detrimental to your peace of mind." I thanked her and hung up, still uncertain about my next move. Taking back the house would be drastic, potentially relationship-altering. Was I ready for that? I spent the afternoon with my closest friend, Martha, at our favorite coffee shop. Martha had known me since before the children were born and had stood by me through Frank's death and the difficult years that followed. "They've taken you for granted for too long, Eleanor," she said after hearing about the Hawaii trip. "You gave them that house out of love, and they've repaid you with disrespect. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people you love is to show them there are consequences for their actions." "But what if this breaks us completely?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if they never forgive me?" Martha covered my hand with hers. "Honey, they're adults, not children. If they can't understand why this hurt you so deeply, then the problem goes far beyond a trip to Hawaii. And frankly, what are you forgiving them for right now?" That question lingered as I drove home. What indeed? For treating me like an inconvenient afterthought? For accepting my generosity while excluding me from their lives? For making me feel obsolete in my own family? Over the next few days, I began researching housing options. If I did reclaim and sell the house, where would I go? What kind of life would I build? I found a listing for a 2-bedroom condo in a lovely building downtown. Walking distance to shops, restaurants, and the library where I volunteered. It had a balcony overlooking a small park, bright rooms, and an elevator perfect for aging in place. The price was reasonable, well below what my house would sell for in the current market. I scheduled a viewing just to explore my options. The moment I walked in, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: possibility. This space could be entirely mine, decorated to my taste, free from memories of exclusion and taken for granted sacrifices. That evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. Jessica had posted photos of new swimsuits she'd bought for the trip. Brian had shared links to exclusive restaurants in Maui, tagging his wife and siblings. Amanda had created a group album titled Hawaii 2023, Family Adventure. The final straw was seeing a comment from Jessica on one of the photos. "So excited for quality time with the whole family." The whole family. Accept me. Something snapped inside me then, not in anger, but in clarity. I'd spent years making myself smaller, less demanding, less present, all to accommodate my children's growing lives. I'd convinced myself this was what good mothers did. They faded into the background when no longer needed. But in that moment, I realized I'd been lying to myself. Good mothers also model self-respect and healthy boundaries. What example was I setting by allowing myself to be dismissed? The next morning, I called Susan and asked her to begin the process of reclaiming the house. Then I called a real estate agent recommended by Martha, Harold Peterson, a distinguished older gentleman with 30 years of experience in the local market. The timing is perfect, Harold told me during our first meeting. Inventory is low, and your neighborhood is highly desirable. We could list by the end of the week and potentially have offers within days. The plan came together with surprising speed. Susan would serve the legal notice to my children the day after they left for Hawaii. Harold would list the house immediately thereafter. I would have approximately 1 week to find a buyer, close the deal, and move before my family returned. It was aggressive, perhaps even ruthless. But as I signed the paperwork authorizing Susan to proceed, I felt not guilt but liberation. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. The sensation was foreign yet exhilarating. The morning of their departure arrived sunny and clear. Jessica had arranged for everyone to meet at her house before heading to the airport together. I baked chocolate chip cookies, everyone's favorite, and arrived bearing the warm, fragrant package like a peace offering. Grandma! Grace, Amanda's daughter, threw her arms around my waist. I wish you were coming with us. Who's going to tell me stories before bed? I hugged her tightly, my resolve wavering momentarily. Your mom tells wonderful stories too, sweetie. And when you get back, you can tell me all about your adventures. The house bustled with activity. Suitcases by the door, last-minute checks for passports and chargers, excited children running up and down the stairs. I moved through it all like a ghost, handing out cookies, offering reminders about sunscreen and motion sickness medication. Jessica kissed my cheek distractedly. Thanks for understanding about the trip, Mom. We'll bring you back something nice. Brian gave me a quick side hug. The house keys are on the counter if you want to check on things while we're gone. Amanda lingered a moment longer than the others. Are you sure you're okay with all this, Mom? You seem quiet. I summoned my most convincing smile. I'm just a little tired. Go have a wonderful time. Make memories. As their 2 SUVs pulled away from the curb, everyone waving, I remained on Jessica's front porch waving back until they disappeared around the corner. Then I let my hand drop and took a deep breath. Phase 1 complete. I drove straight from Jessica's house to meet Harold, my real estate agent. He was waiting for me outside my home with a photographer. Ready to move quickly, Eleanor? He asked, his eyes kind but professional. More than ready, I replied, unlocking the door. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The photographer captured the house's best features while Harold and I discussed listing price and strategy. By that afternoon, just hours after my children's plane had taken off, my house was officially on the market. I've arranged for an exclusive showing tomorrow for serious buyers, Harold informed me. A couple relocating from Chicago for work. They need to move quickly and have already been pre-approved for financing well above our asking price. That night, alone in what had once been my house but had slowly become a place where I felt like a guest, I began packing personal items. Not everything, that would come later, but the irreplaceable things. Frank's watch, our wedding album, the children's baby books, the quilt my grandmother had made, the jewelry box containing my mother's pearls. The next day, true to Harold's prediction, the couple from Chicago fell in love with the house. They offered $10,000 above asking price with a request for an expedited closing. They needed to move in within 2 weeks for their new jobs. It's unusual to move this quickly, Harold cautioned when he called with the news. Are you certain you're prepared for this timeline? Absolutely, I assured him. I've found a condo I love, and the owner is motivated to sell. Susan says she can fast-track both closings. Susan, bless her, worked miracles with the paperwork. Her paralegal hand-delivered the legal notice to each of my children's homes, where it would wait for their return. Meanwhile, she expedited the closing documents for both properties. Martha and my other close friend Deborah helped me pack over the next few days. We worked systematically through the house, sorting items into categories. Things to keep for my new place, things to store temporarily, things to donate, things to leave behind for the new owners. I can't believe how much stuff accumulates over the years, I commented as we sorted through kitchen cabinets. It's not just stuff, Deborah replied, carefully wrapping a teapot in bubble wrap. It's a life. Your life, Eleanor. She was right, of course. Each item held memories: the serving platter used for every Thanksgiving turkey, the chipped mug Brian had made in second grade, the vase Frank had given me on our 10th anniversary. But as we packed, I realized these objects weren't the substance of my life. They were just symbols. The real substance was in the experiences, the love, the growth. And those things I would carry with me. 5 days after my children left for Hawaii, I signed closing papers on both properties, selling the house and purchasing the condo. The proceeds from the house sale, after buying the condo outright, left me with a substantial sum that Susan helped me invest wisely. Moving day came next. The movers were efficient, transporting my carefully curated belongings to my new home. By evening, I was sitting on my new balcony, watching the sunset over the park, a glass of wine in hand. For the first time in years, perhaps decades, I felt truly at peace. This space was mine alone. No memories of being overlooked, no echoes of their house, no reminders of my diminishing role in my children's lives. Here I could simply be Eleanor, not just mom or grandma. The final piece of business came the following day when I received confirmation that the funds from the house sale had been deposited in my account. I looked at the balance. A number large enough to fund not just security in my later years but also dreams I'd long deferred. Perhaps a writing course at the community college. Maybe that trip to Italy I'd always wanted to take. Definitely new bookshelves for my growing collection. As I sat in my sunny new living room, contemplating these possibilities, my phone chimed with a text message from Jessica. Landed. Hawaii was amazing. The kids are exhausted but happy. Robert is grabbing our bags, then we'll head home. Thanks for keeping an eye on everything. I took a deep breath and typed my response. Welcome back. We need to talk. Jessica's response came quickly. Everything okay? Did something happen with the house? I chose not to respond. Some conversations needed to happen in person. 3 hours later, my phone exploded with calls and texts. Jessica first. There are strangers in our house. What's happening? Then Brian. Call me immediately. There's been some kind of mistake with the house. Finally Amanda. Mom, we're freaking out. Please tell us what's going on. I texted them my new address with a simple message. I'm here. Come when you're ready to talk. The doorbell rang 90 minutes later. Through the peephole, I could see all 3 of my children standing in the hallway, still in their travel clothes, faces drawn with confusion and anger. I opened the door and stepped aside to let them enter. They moved into my new living room like invaders, eyes darting around the unfamiliar space, taking in the smaller dimensions, the new furniture arrangement, the view of the park instead of the backyard they knew. Mom, what the hell is going on? Brian was the first to break the silence, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. We just got back from our trip to find another family moving into our house. They said they bought it legally, Jessica added, her arms crossed defensively across her chest. That's impossible. There must be some mistake. Amanda just stared at me, her eyes wide and hurt. Mom, please explain what's happening. I gestured for them to sit. Jessica and Brian remained standing, but Amanda sank onto the edge of my new sofa. There's no mistake, I said calmly, meeting each of their gazes in turn. I sold the house. As the legal documents waiting at each of your homes explain, I exercised the reversibility clause in our gift agreement. You can't do that. Brian exploded. That house belongs to us. You gave it to us. I can and I did, I replied, keeping my voice even. The clause was quite specific. If the gift became detrimental to my well-being or peace of mind, I could reclaim ownership with 30 days' notice. So you waited until we were gone to blindside us? Jessica's voice cracked with emotion. How could you do this to your own children? The same way you could plan a family trip and tell me there was no ticket for me. The words hung in the air between us. That's what this is about? Brian scoffed. You sold our house because you're mad about a vacation? No, I said quietly. I sold the house because when I gave it to you, it changed our relationship. I became less your mother and more a tenant in your investment. The Hawaii trip was just the final confirmation of how you've come to see me. As an afterthought, someone to water the plants while the whole family makes memories without me. Tears spilled down Jessica's cheeks. That's not fair. We just thought you wouldn't enjoy it. All the traveling, the heat, the activities. Did you ask me? Did any of you once consider that I might want to be included in the decision? I looked at each of them in turn. Or was it easier to assume what I would want rather than actually talking to me like an adult with her own desires and capabilities? Brian's anger shifted to legal threats. We'll fight this. You can't just take back a gift worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. We'll get lawyers involved. You're welcome to try, I replied. Susan assures me the paperwork is ironclad. But before you spend money on attorneys, ask yourselves this. Do you really want to sue your mother because she reclaimed a gift after being excluded from her own family? Amanda, who had been mostly silent, finally spoke. Where will we have Christmas now? Where will the kids open presents? Where will we have Sunday dinners? Her questions pierced my heart. Not because of the practical concerns but because she still didn't understand. Those are the wrong questions, Amanda. The right question is, how did we become a family that excludes the person who created it? How did we become people who accept enormous gifts without showing basic consideration in return? This is ridiculous, Brian said, reaching for his keys. I'm calling my lawyer. Brian, wait. Jessica grabbed his arm. Mom's right about one thing. We should have included her in the trip planning. We made a mistake there. But selling the house? That's extreme. Is it? I asked. For years I've watched you all drift away, become busier, make me a lower and lower priority. I've made myself smaller and smaller to accommodate your growing lives. I convinced myself that's what mothers do. They fade into the background when no longer needed. But I was wrong. That's not love, it's erasure. Amanda's tears flowed freely now. Mom, we never meant to make you feel that way. We love you. We just got busy. Distracted. I know, I said gently. I don't think any of you set out to hurt me. But intention doesn't erase impact. And the impact has been years of feeling increasingly peripheral in my own family's life. Brian stormed out first, slamming the door behind him. Jessica followed after, tearfully accusing me of destroying our family. Amanda lingered, looking back from the doorway. Mom, please reconsider. We can fix this. We can be better. I hope so, I replied. But not because I've given you a house. Because I'm your mother, and that should be enough. After they left, I sat alone in my new living room, second-guessing myself. Had I gone too far? Was selling the house a disproportionate response to being excluded from a trip? But deep down, I knew this wasn't about a vacation. It was about years of subtle dismissals, of being treated as an obligation rather than a valued family member. It was about teaching my adult children that relationships require reciprocity and respect, a lesson I should have taught them long before now. The week following our confrontation passed in silence. No calls, no texts, not even angry emails threatening legal action. The silence was both a relief and a new kind of pain. Had I pushed them away permanently? Had my stand for self-respect cost me my family? I busied myself settling into my new home, arranging books on shelves, hanging pictures, figuring out the best morning sunlight spots for my houseplants. I joined a yoga class at the community center down the street and reconnected with a book club I'd drifted away from years ago. Each day brought small discoveries: the best coffee shop within walking distance, a hidden bench in the park perfect for reading, the friendly elderly couple in the condo next door who invited me to their weekly card game. Yet beneath these pleasant distractions ran a current of doubt and loneliness. Had I made a terrible mistake? Would my grandchildren grow up barely knowing me? Would holidays become battlegrounds of divided loyalties? On the 8th day of silence, my phone chimed with a text from Amanda. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? Just us. We arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between our homes. I arrived early, my stomach tight with anxiety. When Amanda walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked, eyes shadowed. hair hastily pulled back, none of her usual careful makeup. She slid into the chair across from me, wrapping her hands around the mug of hot chocolate I'd ordered for her. Her favorite since childhood. "Thank you," she said, looking down at the drink. "You remembered." "I remember everything about you, Amanda. That's what mothers do." She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Mom, I've been doing a lot of thinking this week. About what you said about how we've treated you. And," I prompted gently when she fell silent. "And you were right." Her eyes filled with tears. "We've been terrible. Not just about the trip, but for years. We've taken you for granted. We've excluded you from decisions. We've acted like your only value was in what you could give us. Babysitting, house-sitting, emotional support when we needed it." She reached across the table to grasp my hand. "I'm so sorry, Mom. So deeply sorry." The knot in my chest began to loosen. "Thank you for saying that. Daniel and I have been talking about it all week." He pointed out something I hadn't even realized. Whenever we discuss family plans, we always frame it as if Mom's available, or if Mom wants to, but we never actually ask you. We just assume. I nodded, grateful for Daniel's insight. "That's exactly it, Amanda. I became an afterthought, not a priority. I don't want Grace to learn that's how we treat the people we love," she said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I don't want her to think it's okay to push aside family members when they're no longer convenient." We talked for nearly 3 hours, peeling back layers of assumptions and unspoken expectations. Amanda acknowledged how the house transfer had subtly changed her perception of our relationship. I admitted that my fear of being burdensome had prevented me from expressing my hurt feelings earlier. "Jessica and Brian are still pretty angry," she confessed as we prepared to leave. "Brian's been consulting with lawyers, though I think he's starting to realize it's a lost cause." "And Jessica?" Amanda sighed. "She's hurt and confused. She keeps saying she was just trying to plan a nice trip for everyone, and now everything's ruined." I nodded, unsurprised. "They'll come around in their own time or they won't. But I'm grateful that you did." She hugged me tightly before we parted. "I love you, Mom. And I promise things will be different going forward." 3 days later, to my surprise, Brian and Kimberly showed up at my door unannounced. "May we come in?" Kimberly asked when I opened the door. Brian stood slightly behind her, his expression unreadable. I invited them in, offered drinks which they declined, and waited as they settled awkwardly on my sofa. "I've decided not to pursue legal action," Brian began without preamble. "Not because I couldn't win, but because Kimberly convinced me it would permanently damage our family." Kimberly shot him a look, and he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's not entirely true," he amended. "The lawyers also said the reversibility clause was solid. But mainly I realized that suing my own mother would be a new low, even for me." "Even for you?" I echoed. "Mom, I know I'm not the most emotionally aware person," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Kimberly's been pointing out for years that I can be self-centered. I didn't really get it until now." "What changed?" I asked. Brian hesitated, then pulled out his phone and pulled up a photo. He handed it to me. A picture of him as a teenager, arm in a cast, with me beside him in the emergency room, looking exhausted but smiling. "Remember this? When I broke my arm skateboarding after you specifically told me not to try that ramp." I nodded, the memory vivid. He'd been 16, testing boundaries as teenagers do. "You sat with me for 6 hours in the ER. You didn't lecture me once. You just made sure I was okay, then drove me to school every day for weeks until I could manage on my own again." His voice grew thick. "I found this while looking for documentation about the house. And I realized, I can't remember the last time I put your needs before mine. Not once in the past decade." It wasn't a full apology, not yet. But it was a beginning. An acknowledgement of the imbalance that had developed in our relationship. We spent the next hour talking through years of accumulated hurts and misunderstandings. Brian's defenses gradually lowered as he began to see our family dynamic from my perspective. "The house was never just about property value to me," I explained. "It represented security, yes, but more importantly, it was the gathering place for our family. When you all started calling it our house instead of Mom's house, something fundamental shifted. I went from homeowner to tenant in your minds. By the time they left, Brian had moved from grudging acceptance to genuine remorse. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said at the door. "Not just about the house or the trip, but for a lot of things over a lot of years." Jessica proved the most resistant. 2 weeks passed after Brian's visit with no word from her. I learned through Amanda that she'd instructed Robert to approach me about negotiating a solution, which I firmly declined. I would not speak through intermediaries to my own daughter. Finally, after nearly a month of standoff, Jessica called. "Mom, this has gone on long enough," she began, her voice strained but determined. "We need to work this out as a family. Can we all meet at your new place this Sunday?" The family meeting that Sunday was initially tense. Jessica arrived with Robert and their children, her posture rigid, her greeting formal. Brian and Kimberly came next, followed by Amanda and Daniel with Grace. We gathered in my living room, the adults perched on seats while the children played quietly in the corner, sensing the unusual atmosphere. "I called this meeting because we need to clear the air," Jessica began, ever the administrator. "What happened with the house and the trip has created a rift in our family that needs healing." "I agree," I said simply. "But healing requires understanding the wound first." What followed was the most honest conversation our family had experienced in years. Each of my children expressed their perspective: Jessica's genuine belief that she was being considerate by not burdening me with travel, Brian's admission that he'd viewed the house more as an asset than a home, Amanda's confession that she'd gone along with excluding me to avoid conflict with her siblings. When it was my turn, I spoke from the heart. For years, I've felt increasingly invisible in this family. The Hawaii trip wasn't the cause. It was just the final confirmation that my role had diminished to convenient grandmother and house-sitter. I didn't sell the house for revenge. I sold it because I needed to reclaim my identity and my autonomy. Jessica listened intently, her administrator's mind processing this new information. "I never saw it that way," she finally admitted. "I was so focused on organizing the perfect family vacation that I never stopped to consider that family includes you. Not as an obligation, but as an essential part of who we are. We've been acting like we're doing you favors by including you in our lives," Robert observed quietly. "When really it's been the other way around." Jessica's tears finally came then. Not the angry tears of our first confrontation, but tears of genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I've been terrible. I've been treating you like a problem to manage instead of my mother to love." I opened my arms and she moved into them like she had as a little girl. "I forgive you," I whispered. "And I love you." As we all wiped away tears, Brian suggested family counseling. A surprise coming from him. "We obviously have patterns we need to work on," he said. "All of us together." We agreed to try therapy as a family. We also established new ground rules. Weekly family dinners without excuses, regular check-ins that weren't just about practical matters, and most importantly, a commitment to honest communication rather than convenient assumptions. Jessica was the last to leave that day. At the door, she turned to me with red-rimmed eyes. "The house was never just a house to you, was it?" "No," iraplia sufli. "It was the physical representation of my place in this family. When that place became conditional, something had to change." She nodded slowly. "I understand now. And Mom? Next time we plan a trip, you'll be the first person we include. Not because we should, but because we want to." 6 months after selling the house, our family looked remarkably different. The weekly dinners we'd committed to had evolved into a rotating schedule: 1 week at Jessica's, the next at Brian's, then Amanda's, then mine. My small condo, which the children had initially viewed with pity, had become a favorite gathering spot, especially for the grandchildren who loved the park across the street. The family therapy sessions, while occasionally uncomfortable, had proven invaluable. Our therapist, Dr. Mitchell, gently guided us through explorations of family dynamics, helping us identify patterns that had developed over decades. Jessica worked on her tendency to make decisions for others, for their own good. Brian practiced recognizing when his self-focus excluded others. Amanda learned to express her opinions instead of defaulting to peacekeeping. And I worked on communicating my needs directly instead of silently accommodating, until resentment built. Meanwhile, my new life blossomed in unexpected ways. The condo wasn't just a downsized version of my old home. It represented a fresh chapter centered around my own desires and interests. I joined a seniors hiking group that met weekly for gentle nature walks. I volunteered as a docent at the local art museum. I took a creative writing class where I began crafting memoirs about my life with Frank and raising our children. Most significantly, I used some of the proceeds from the house sale to fund a 2-week trip to Europe, a dream Frank and I had shared but never realized. Traveling solo through Italy at 69 years old was both terrifying and exhilarating. I sent my children daily photos of my adventures, sipping espresso in Roman piazzas, marveling at Michelangelo's David in Florence, floating down Venetian canals at sunset. Mom looks 10 years younger. I overheard Jessica tell Amanda when I returned, tanned and energized from my journey. I've never seen her so alive. That's because we're finally seeing her as a person, not just our mother, Amanda replied wisely. The change extended to my relationships with my grandchildren as well. Rather than being the background grandmother who provided cookies and birthday checks, I became more actively involved in their lives. Lily, Jessica's daughter, started joining me for my museum shifts, developing her own appreciation for art. Thomas discovered he shared my love of mystery novels, and we started our own 2-person book club. Grace, always artistic like her mother, spent Saturday mornings painting with me on my balcony. As Christmas approached, our first holiday season since the dramatic changes in our family, Jessica called a family meeting. I've been thinking about our traditions, she began once we were all gathered in her living room. Every year, we've done Christmas morning at the old house. Obviously, that's not possible anymore. I braced myself, wondering if old resentments would resurface. So, Jessica continued, I thought we might try something new. What if we celebrated at Mom's condo this year? It's smaller, yes, but that just means we'll be closer together. The genuine warmth in her suggestion brought tears to my eyes. I think that's a wonderful idea, Brian agreed, surprising me further. And I have something else to propose. He pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. Inside was a brochure for a villa in Tuscany. We've been planning this for months, he explained as I stared at the glossy photos. A family trip to Italy next summer. All of us together. And Mom, you're not just included, you're our guide. Since you've already explored the country, we want to make new memories, Amanda added softly. Better ones where everyone is valued and included. That Christmas in my condo was unlike any holiday we'd celebrated before. The space was indeed smaller, but as Jessica had predicted, that only brought us closer, physically and emotionally. We abandoned the formal dinner in favor of an Italian-themed buffet, inspired by my travels. The grandchildren performed a Christmas play they'd written themselves, with roles for every family member, including a starring part for Grandma Eleanor, the family hero. As we gathered around my small living room after dinner, gifts opened and holiday music playing softly, I reflected on the journey we'd taken this year. The pain of exclusion had led to confrontation, which had led to reconciliation, which had ultimately led to this moment of genuine connection. I have a toast, Jessica announced, raising her glass of eggnog. To Mom, who had the courage to teach us a difficult but necessary lesson. Who showed us that family isn't about houses or vacations, but about seeing and valuing each other. Who loved us enough to hold us accountable. To Mom, echoed Brian and Amanda, their spouses joining in. Later, as the evening wound down and family members began bundling up to head home through the light snow, Amanda pulled me aside. Do you ever regret it, Mom? Selling the house? I considered the question carefully. I regret that it came to that. I regret not speaking up sooner about how I was feeling. But the outcome? I gestured around at our relaxed, happy family. How could I regret something that brought us here? The truth was, in losing the house, I had gained something far more valuable. A family that saw me, respected me, and included me not out of obligation but out of genuine desire for my presence. I had reclaimed not just my autonomy but my rightful place in the family I had created. As I hugged each family member goodbye that night, I whispered a silent thank you to Frank, wherever he might be. We had raised children who, despite their missteps, ultimately had the capacity to learn, grow, and love more deeply. And in teaching them this final difficult lesson about respect and boundaries, I had honored both his memory and myself. Standing on my balcony after everyone had gone, watching the snow dust the park in silver, I felt a profound sense of peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. Sometimes I reflected the greatest acts of love aren't the ones that feel warm and comfortable. Sometimes love requires disruption, confrontation, and courage. I had discovered at 68 that I was stronger than I knew, that I deserved more than I had settled for. That teaching my children about healthy boundaries was perhaps my final and most important act of mothering. Has your family ever taken you for granted? Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to restore your self-respect? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more life experiences that might help you navigate your own relationships. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your worth and teach others how to treat you. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to stand up for yourself when necessary, even when it's difficult.